G'day, I am Mordechai Becher.
And I'm Yoshua Karsh.
And welcome to Two Rabbis and
And
a
a podcast.
There you go. Not very imaginative, but accurate. And if you like our podcast, please press the like button and subscribe on whatever, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Torah Anytime or YouTube, and share it with people and friends and so on. There's no charge. We just asked if you enjoy it, express that by sharing it and saying you like it. And fairly simple, fairly simple. We will not come after you, track you down and.
Not that we can't. We
Yeah,
can't.
well,
we do have the information.
Yes, yeah.
But we won't.
We will not do it.
Okay, fine.
And last week, or the last episode, it's been a few weeks because I've been away. So Israel mostly. In any case, the last time we spoke was about kashrut, kosher laws, kosher food, Jewish eating, and that experience sociologically and to some degree spiritually. I don't remember if we discussed some of the special foods which have got a certain ritual and symbolic meaning to them. We did do an episode about bread.
Yeah.
Bread and matzah, etc. There are many other foods which Jews have, which have got some type of significance to them. We may have mentioned chamin, otherwise known as cholent or adafina, which there was an article by a food historian, which I read, who says that most foods are defined by their ingredients, the recipe. He said not all. He said cholent is a food defined not by the ingredients, because the ingredients vary from family to family, from country to country. It's a stew which is eaten. It is put on the fire Friday afternoon before Shabbat, Sabbath, and it's eaten hot Shabbat lunchtime. And he said what unites, and the recipes vary wildly, and don't even want to talk about the Parapat ketchup controversy of 78, which ended in violence. But the various forms of this dish, cholent, chamin, adafina, really are a protest food. That's how he described it. It's a food that declares our belief in the oral tradition, which allows fire to be burning over Shabbat. We light candles before Shabbat. We have hot food. And this would be an indication that it's that you believe in our oral tradition. In fact, there were groups of people, the Karaites, earlier than the Sadducees, who did not accept that, and they would have cold food and sit in the dark.
Because it says, "Lo sevaru eish b'chol moshvosechem." You should not have a fire. They interpret it as, you shouldn't have a fire burning.
It's superficially
in all your dwelling places.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. You can imagine a Karaite household. Husband comes out of the shower, comes downstairs, said, "Honey, it's almost Shabbat. Did you blow out the candles?"
That's it.
That's it. And there's even Reb Zrachia Halevi, Provençal scholar, 13th century, I think it was. He actually writes in the 3rd chapter of his commentary on Shabbat that some say Yesh Omrim, some say Takanas Chachomim, it's a decree of the sages, Lechol Chamin b'Shabbat, to eat hot food on Shabbat. And he says, and he goes on, Misha Eina Ochel, anyone who doesn't eat it, Tzarich Bedika Acharav Shemahu Min, we must investigate such a person lest he be a heretic. V'imate, and if he dies, it asku bo amamim, let him be buried by the Gentiles, because we don't look at him as Jewish. That's pretty serious stuff.
Yes.
And so most of our halachic authorities don't believe that that's the case nowadays. People may not like cholent, which is conceivable. It doesn't make him a heretic. An idiot, yes, but not a heretic. Right?
Yes.
So, but in any case, and by the way, I don't know if we mentioned this last time. I'm sorry if there's a repetition, but this is actually a book which I love. It's called The Encyclopedia of Jewish Food.
Nice.
by Gil Marks, who's a rabbi and a chef and a food historian. It is absolutely phenomenal. Amazing. And the first entry in the encyclopedia is Adafina, which is a Sephardic Shabbat stew, which is what Ashkenazim call Cholent. And what's fascinating, he says, is that the earliest record we have of a recipe for this is 1570, July 4th, 1570, in the Canary Islands, in a deposition before the Inquisition. And basically, this is what it says. Ana Gonzalez deposes that she was in the service of Ana de Belmonte. This non-Jewish maid was in the service of a family who are conversos, Jews who are openly Christians. And she writes, she testified that she saw her mistress cooked mutton with oil and onions, which she understands is the Jewish dish adafina. And indeed, one of the most incriminating activities, according to, for a converso to engage in, was cooking adafina, because that showed that secretly they were keeping Shabbat, they were keeping Judaism, and people were burnt at the stake for this. So
it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
It's mind-blowing to me, right? And so that's his first, and it sounds, I got to say, it does sound delicious. It's one of the dishes that Jews have eaten and continue to eat as part of our tradition.
Have you, in fact, chosen to make and eat adafina?
No, I'm usually on the consumption side of the cooking process, not on the production side. So
I see that, but every once in a while, I'm thinking it might be.
No.
All right, fine. Now, I think to myself, when I hear Cholent, one of the things that I think about, because somehow Cholent is obviously such a defining feature for a Shabbos day meal.
Yes.
But in many a shul, accompanying the Cholent will be alcohol, Kiddush clubs, etc., around Cholent, or sometimes around herring, or etc.
Charcuterie board.
Yes. So while Cholent is a reminder of a poorer time in our history, there are a lot of places, and I'm certainly very attracted to places that have a good Kiddush. But there are a lot of places now that have more extravagant Kiddushes.
Yes.
And part of the extravagance is the alcohol that's being served at those Kiddushes. And so I was thinking if we could talk a little bit about alcohol, and then, as long as we're talking about the alcohol, to talk about marijuana, LSD, ayahuasca, and peyote. The reason I was thinking that we might go there is because about 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, Rabbi Reese, who is the Av Based-In, the head of the Chicago Rabbinical Council, and in Chicago, that's the Kashrus organization, but it's also very influential around the country. He was talking about giving a hechsher on marijuana-infused edibles or products, and the issue that comes up is that alcohol has already, and it was one of the complexities of this discussion, is that alcohol consumption is encouraged in many Orthodox communities, kashrus observing communities. And it would seem like whatever the downsides of marijuana are, that alcohol has many of them. And he made the comment that he believes that if kashrus organizations would have been around when alcohol was first being considered as something to consume, that they would have hesitated to give a hechsher. And that officially it was the position of the CRC, at least up and I'm assuming it continues to be, that they are not going to give a hechsher on edibles infused with marijuana, because of a large array of concerns about its use and about the larger culture that is involved in its use. And he feels like we get a chance with marijuana to do what we might have done already with alcohol. So are so used to alcohol at kiddushes or farbrengens or things that for many of us, it seems like a no-brainer that it's not just permitted to drink alcohol, but almost necessary. It's necessary in many cases to drink alcohol. And yeah, so I thought we could go, and I know it seems like it's a complete right turn out of this thing, but I think it's one of these. It's a left. You think it's left?
Left.
I thought it was a right. You always go to the right, is what I was told.
Look, we know that wine has always played a central role in many, many mitzvahs. In Torah, wine is one of the things that the land of Israel is praised for its wine in the Tanakh. One of the visions of the prophets is Ish Tachat Gefano, the person will be sitting in Israel under his grapevine. We know that there is wine is consumed at every important occasion: Shabbat, Yom Tov, at a Brit Milah, at a wedding. We have under the chuppah, we have at the Sheva Brachot. In the days of the sages, they would drink wine. There'd be special blessings that a mourner would make during the Shiva, the 7 days of mourning, over wine.
And it's not simply that it's the product of grapes.
No, it's wine.
The intoxicating, or not to be out of control intoxicated, but the intoxicating feature of wine is meant to be there. It's part of why it's being brought.
Sefer
You're supposed to feel something.
Yeah, the Sefer HaChinuch, the great Spanish, medieval Spanish book of the commandments, talks about the reasons for the commandments. When he talks about the fact that Kiddush on Shabbat is meant to be made over wine, he says the reason is because it puts you in a good mood. And we know from Mishle, Yain Yisamach Levav Enosh, that wine causes the heart of the person to rejoice. Velechem Levav Enosh Yisad, like bread, sustains and nourishes. Wine causes rejoicing and simcha. And we know that, our sages were well aware of other intoxicating substances. They talk about beer, shikar, and other substances of that sort. So wine is very significant. And the fact that that people abuse alcohol was something also well known back then. Right? We talk about restrictions on praying when you are drunk. Not appropriate to stand before the king when a person's intoxicated. The idea of not going into Shabbat while intoxicated. The idea of shichrusoi shel Lot, the extreme drunkenness of Lot, in which the person is treated legally as insane, as not competent. The idea of refraining from alcohol and substances during the 9 days, for example, coming up soon. It's interesting. I have a poem here from Dunash ibn Lebret, So Dunash was the author of Dror Yikra, which many people are familiar with, one of the most beautiful and one of the oldest of the Zmirot on Shabbos. He's got a poem, I'm going to read it in English. Drink, he said, don't drowse. Drink wine aged well in barrels, near henna beds and aloes and roses mixed with myrrh, in pomegranate groves by grapevines and date palms, with tender plants and saplings and tamarisks in rows. He's describing a garden party in medieval Spain. And he goes on, to the sound of coursing water, the thrumming of the zither, it's a type of a guitar, accompanies the singers with reed pipes and an oud. All the trees there spread with branches and fine fruit, with every sort of bird sings amongst the leaves. The pigeons coo and moan, it's a beautiful poem. We'll drink along the beds, hedged about by lilies, drive away our sorrows with wine and songs of praise. We'll eat the sweetest morsels and sip from studded bowls and act as though we're giants drinking from their casks. Come morning, I'll arise and go to slaughter bulls, choice fattened creatures, cows, rams, calves, the meat board. He's describing a Kiddush club here, right? Anointed with the oil, we'll burn fragrant scents and live our lives in bliss. This is someone telling, in the poem, the person is speaking to Dunash. Dunash responds, silence, I rebuked him. How could you propose this? The temple and God's footstool are held by unclean hands. You're speaking like a fool who chooses the path of sloth. What you say is vain, the talk of a buffoon. You've left your meditation on the laws of heaven. You'd celebrate while jackals roam on Zion's hills. How can we drink wine or even raise our eyes while we now are nothing, detested and despised?
So their wine is very much something like a kind of indication that you've arrived and that things are okay.
Yeah, there was a culture in Spain at that time of drinking parties in the beautiful climate, gorgeous outdoor gorgeous gardens, the fragrances, eating meat, drinking wine, and there was a culture which some of our sages, the Dunash ibn Lebret, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, rejected that culture eventually and understood it as being inappropriate. And you correctly point out that we've come back to that to some degree, not maybe to a greater degree. The phenomenon of lavish kiddushes, which I love and enjoy.
Right. And I would go out of my way for a lavish kiddush. Yeah.
And but it may, and it's really hard to give specifics of how we define it, but it seems to have gone a little too far, maybe. I don't know. Certainly the alcohol. And there have been some terrible tragedies. We know that on Friday afternoons there's an idea of to'ameha, which, strictly speaking, as the Mishabura says, is basically tasting the Shabbat food to make sure it needs spices, salt, etc. That has transmogrified into people having feasts and getting drunk before going to shul on Friday night, and that's horrific. And there were some tragedies of drunk driving, and I don't want to get into all that, but yeah, I already did. But it is somewhat concerning. I think the alcohol abuse is a problem. It's an issue. It destroys people's lives and destroys families, and I think like everything else, moderation is appropriate.
There are people who would like for there to be firm guidelines from authorities that would solve these kind of social problems, but
these don't work. They generally don't work. I remember seeing in a book. It's called The Venice Ghetto, but okay, whatever. Yeah. Not a bestseller, but anyway, they have there a menu from a wedding. Venice, I think it was 17th century.
Okay.
And it was after the local Beis-Din had issued, the local Jewish court had issued guidelines to reduce the amount people spent on weddings and to have a more modest reception.
Yeah.
17th century.
Yeah.
And the menu, the author found a menu of a wedding after these guidelines had been published, which included 6 meat courses.
6 separate courses
of meat, different types of meat, which looked, the menu was awesome. I would have loved to have been there, but I'm salivating as hopefully not.
Was that in compliance, or he brought it because it was out of compliance?
It was not. It's unclear. In other words, the author was unclear because was it something which was minimal compared to what it was before the decree, or were people just ignoring it?
Right.
And we know that these type of decrees are not very effective, I don't think. I mean, unless you're in a very tightly controlled community like Hasidim,
right,
where you're living in New Square, and that's it. You can
whatever
either escape or conform.
Yeah. Right.
But for most communities, doesn't seem
also,
to be
I think that we're meant at some point to have to make our own way when it comes to certain areas of our life, that there's room for our own personal decision making, and that not everything is going to be able to be prescribed by some outside authority. Every aspect of your behavior, there are going to be elements of our behavior which could be dangerous, and could be harmful, that are going to be left up to our own discretion, that we somehow are expected to manage these areas. And yeah, I agree with you that in most communities, except something like Square, in most communities, you have to assume that guidelines are not going to, or they shouldn't be declared, that limit everybody, but that, like you are saying, that doesn't minimize the dangers. Alcohol is a dangerous. It's dangerous, and it can cause terrible harm and suffering.
And I think I agree with Rabbi Reese, which is that alcohol is already the cat's out of the bag.
Right.
There's not much we can do about it. But havu de lo loisif, right? We should not be adding more substances which also are problematic. And I don't think anyone disagrees that substances like marijuana and LSD and ayahuasca, etc., do have problems. Whether they are affecting the brain, certainly for teenagers and younger people, this is certainly dangerous. And my wife's done extensive research on that, but it's certainly affecting cognitive function and memory and so on and so forth. But even for adults, there are issues, etc. Plus, there is the very fact of being somewhat intoxicated, out of control, and not fully operative in terms of free will.
When I was in high school, I went to Brisk in Chicago. We actually donated a Reb Chaim on the Rambam, Jonathan Zefron, Oliver Sholem, a couple other guys from Chicago, and I donated a Reb Chaim, and we wrote on it. It was in memory of a friend of ours from Brisk in Chicago who was nifter very young. And we wrote from his friends from Yeshivas Brisk in Chicago. And like a week after we had donated it, somebody found that somebody had crossed off Brisk in protest to the idea that it should even be called Brisk. There was one of the Briskers from Eretz Yisrael who was really concerned about it. Anyways, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, who was the Rosh Hashiva of Brisk in Chicago, was very much against getting drunk. And he held it was also to get drunk at all. And on Purim, they were very careful to make sure that none of the Bochurim, even the members of the Beis Medrash who were old enough, had alcohol. So, and he did not. He had a Suda. We had a Suda at his house, and there was no wine served. He held that you could be fulfill the requirement of Ad Delo Yoda by taking a nap
As
after
that's
having
the
something.
Rambam. Maimonides
Right.
actually says that.
Yeah.
Although he does say drink wine and then drink a
Right. It
little
could
more
be
wine
that
than you
he would
used to,
allow, I
and then
forgot,
take
if
a
he
nap.
allowed a tiny bit.
Because the
It could
Gemara
be allowed a
does
tiny bit.
clearly
Right.
require the consumption of wine on Purim.
Right. It could be allowed a tiny bit.
Yeah.
It could be allowed a tiny
But
bit.
I can
Yeah.
understand that,
Yeah.
in other words, and
Because he held you're not allowed to be out of control. You're meant to,
yeah.
part of the responsibility of somebody who's an Eved Hashem is that you're always being able to manage your faculties, and that you can't be out of control. And so he held that you can't get drunk.
Well, that's actually one of the ideas. Rav Moshe Feinstein there's two responsa which clearly were from teenage boys, probably in camp, and he actually mentions this and they both ask for a halachic response without any sermonizing. That's what he writes in the question. You ask me for a response which is halacha and not musar, no
It had to be
sermons,
camp. Yeah.
and
It
I
had to
will
be
do
camp.
that.
Yeah.
Right. One question was about having a girlfriend,
Yeah.
and the other question was about marijuana. Fascinating. So anyway, I don't remember the year, but Reb Moshe Feinstein felt that marijuana was prohibited, and he gives a few reasons.
Yeah.
First of all, he says possible danger to health, right? And even if he doesn't damage the body, it may damage the mind and perception
Right.
and the ability
Right.
to comprehend, which he says is even more serious because that
Right.
impairs your ability to study Torah, to pray, to perform mitzvot. All of
Yeah.
which, if they lack clarity of mind, it's as though they were not done at all. So, number one,
Yeah.
again, echoing Rav Aaron Soloveitchik.
Right.
Secondly, he says probably also against your parents' wishes, which means
Kibbut Avim.
kibbut av v'aim. He says their third is the law of the land, which obviously has changed.
Right. Yeah.
And then he says the last point that he makes is that anything which creates an intense desire greater than the desire for food and other physical needs, especially if it's something which is difficult to control or eliminate, that person has transgressed the wayward and rebellious son, who the Talmud talks about someone who drinks wine and eats rare meat. And to some degree, the way it describes this person is really as an addict. He becomes addicted to this. He takes money from his parents and he steals, and who knows, it will lead to more theft and violence and so on and so forth. So even if the Gemara, one opinion, the Gemara says it never happened, never will happen,
Right.
but we derive from here that Rav Moshe Feinstein feels that the wayward son is a paradigm of a prohibition against addiction.
Interesting.
And he sees it as, and he says certainly, and he says this, how much more so are 40 ori? He says because the wayward son is talking about an addiction to things which are basically beneficial, like wine and their foods,
Food. Yeah.
wine and meat.
Yeah.
He says how much more so for something which is not even a physical need. It's not nutritious. It's not, and it creates. Now he's not even talking about addiction, like chemical addiction, although that
Right.
may be an issue with some of these
Right.
substances. But he's talking about just to create a desire, which is a very overwhelming and major desire. He feels that's problem. And this would apply, I think, equally to drinking alcohol in large quantities, and
Right.
but it certainly applies to the various substances that you mentioned. And I think that's a consideration that should not be ignored.
Right. Now, I personally drink, and my um, my sort of explanation for my drinking, let's say it's mostly on Shabbos a Kiddush or something like that, but but my explanation for it is that I can manage uh, the intake and I know how much I can drink so that I maintain control. So now that kind of thinking, which is it's my kind of thinking when it comes to alcohol. That kind of thinking is somewhere in the middle. In other words, it's not what we'll call the minimalist approach. I'm going to call Rav Aaron's approach to drinking as a kind of minimalist thing, which is you should never do anything that could possibly get you there. So it's better not to drinking it at all unless you have to. But otherwise, you shouldn't be drinking it at all. But and um,
That
I'm
doesn't
going to
seem to
call
be,
that a kind of minimalist
yeah,
approach,
which
which
is the
is
minority. I think it's the minority approach.
you're not going to enter here because if you enter here, you're going to enter a place where you potentially could lose control down the road. So I've obviously chosen for myself that I'm going to drink up and manage my drinking. Now, whether I don't know if people outside of me would think I've always been a good judge about that, but that's what I've I've decided to do with regard to it. Because again, this is something where there does seem to be an expectation that we're somehow going to manage it. Same thing with my eating, which is not always the healthiest. Um, and but there's another area where the amount of food that you eat could be dangerous and and the kinds of foods that I eat could be dangerous and harmful to myself, and I'm left to somehow manage that, right? So the question is, if I have that attitude, let's say with alcohol and with food, um, so does that attitude, is there an opening for that kind of attitude? Is there is there
Well,
backing for that kind of attitude? Um, uh, there may not be a possibility of a different attitude. I mean, the different one would be
I think
not to
that's the
engage
most
at
common
all.
attitude. The problem with it, that's a normal attitude. I think
Right.
you're a
Yeah.
mature adult and you
Yeah.
feel like an right. But the problem with that is that we miscalculate
Right.
or we are tempted. Or it's a the Ramban, one of the most famous Rambans on Chumash
Yeah.
regarding Kedoshim Tihu.
Yeah.
So you shall be holy. So the Ramban there says, because the Torah prohibits certain foods,
Yeah.
prohibits certain activities, but it doesn't say how much to eat. It cannot legislate for every person because it
Right.
changes for person to person. He says
Right.
the Torah gives a catch-all commandment, which
Right.
is you ask yourself, is it kosher? Is it not kosher? If it's not kosher, I cannot eat it. If it's kosher, the next question I have to ask myself is this much food kadoshim?
Right.
Right? He says the Torah, it's interesting because the Ramban points out the Torah does this in numerous places. In financial law, the Torah tells us don't steal, pay your worker on time, repay your debt, etc. But there's so many areas where it's unclear. So the Torah gives a general, which is tov vasisa hatov vayashar, do that which is good and upright. Another example, the Ramban has another place. The Torah says don't do certain things on Shabbat and Yom
Yeah.
Tov. He says, but within that, a person could really be sweating, perspiring, right? Not doing a technical prohibition. So the Torah says, B'yom hashvi tishbot, rest.
Right.
So it's like the Torah has this two-tiered system where there's what is prohibited and what's permitted. And now it's permitted, it leaves it to your discretion. And does this fit in with the Torah's definition of tov v'yashar, good and upright? Does this fit
Right.
in with the Torah's opinion of kadosh, that's not so clear for some persons.
Right.
And
I could say though that if it's that term kadosh and even the Ramban, depending on whose hands that is in, it can it can be a very kind of stark place where, to be honest, it doesn't seem like there could be fun.
well, I don't know
Or
if that's
and
correct.
like what we would call fun, it seems like would be outside the
I'm not so
boundaries of
sure.
some of these stark
Uh-huh.
understandings. Tell me, like what, like let's say I wanted to just um, have fun. How would that fit in to
So
the stark
Rav Shimon
view?
Scott points out in his
Yeah,
introduction to Shari
where he
Yoshim,
talks about kadoshim to you.
and he says one of
Right.
the ideas of Kedoshim is if my life as a whole is dedicated to the common good of the Jewish people and of the world,
Yeah.
closest to Hashem. He
Yeah.
says then, and within that life, we know there are authentic needs for enjoyment, there are authentic needs for relaxation, there's
Right.
an authentic need for sleep, there's an
Yeah.
authentic need for food.
Yeah.
He says that also is included, is a kadosh of the word dedicated.
So
So,
now
so my fun or
yeah.
enjoyment or
Right.
social enjoy on Shabbos,
Right.
having l'chaim at Kiddush, right?
Right.
Why would you automatically assume that that's not kadosh? That might be kadosh. Excess of
Okay.
it might
All
not
right.
be.
So now we're expanding it a little
Yes,
beyond what sounds like the original stark prescription of looking at the food and saying to myself, because initially it sounds like it's just a question about nutrition. Is this healthy and nutritious? That should be my question. And is this the amount that I need?
it's also
That would be
enjoyment.
the original question. Mayim
Oh, yeah.
b'msora tishta. Like
You have to
uh,
be
has
prepared.
belechem tochal, that I'm just going to have what is necessary for the maintenance of my being. But now you're suggesting that, and you're saying Rav Shimon Shkop is also suggesting that what we would call fun, which is not easy to define, but something that is fun could also be part of what we would call a need. I think Rabbi Gottlieb called them psychological
Yeah,
needs,
yeah,
something
exactly.
like
I,
that.
I
Yeah,
agreed.
yeah.
But
So it could be going back to a kiddush or delicious food that it may not fit the original limited criteria of is this nutritious and necessary, but it's now being expanded to include fun, and perhaps especially on Shabbos, Oneg Shabbos. I don't know if like it might
absolutely, why
move
not?
into that realm.
Yeah.
So now, once again, there's an opening for something like alcohol to be included because it is a reliable, dangerous, but reliable source of what you might call fun
But
or
discretionary.
enjoyment.
The person has to have an awareness. Have to
Right.
have an awareness. I mean, I think the Baal Shem Tov in one of his letters writes that he came to the world to teach love of God, love of Torah, and love of the Jewish people. And then one can achieve all of these without becoming an ascetic. Right? Now, it's interesting because historians believe that there was a major alcoholism problem amongst the early Hasidim, 19th century, 18th, 19th century Poland. And considering the circumstances in which a lot of people lived in, I can probably we can be
Yeah.
forgiving about
There's
the
some
drinking.
places where that's
That was it.
in many people's minds, that's the only place you're going to find any fun. Yeah.
That was the only. There was not a
It's the
lot of
only
that.
outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's not illegitimate to say that we need some type of outlet and tasting and there's many Gemaras like we're just the first one is the most famous is Rabbi Elazar Kapar who says that the Nazir who makes a vow and part of that vow is not drinking wine or wine products for a month, he brings a korban, an offering which is an atonement to atone for what he sinned against the soul. And Rabbi Elazar Kapar says, against whose soul did he sin? Didn't hurt anyone. He says his own soul. He denied himself something which Hashem permitted.
Right.
So denying himself something which Hashem permitted, that's not ideal. And you know, you got the
Right.
Gemara in the I think we made mention this last time, the Gemara in Cholent, where Yalta asks Rav Nachman, she wants to taste, I want to taste meat and milk. And he says, yeah, no
Right.
worries. Right.
Yeah.
And he figures out how to, right. That's considered to be legitimate. That's considered to
Right.
be okay. And the Gemara says that, Rav Yehuda Hanassi, right, was so wealthy that he had all different types of radish and vegetables, all seasons. This is in the days before refrigeration and food imports and trucking, right?
Yeah.
So that was legitimate to some degree. I think the Gemara discusses things which are marchiv daito, which
Expand.
your mind. And one of the
Right.
things is beauty,
Yeah.
physical beauty expands the mind.
Yeah.
A pleasant home expands
Yeah.
the mind, right? I don't see why we cannot include food and a shot of single malt, right? As
Yeah.
including that. But again, you're right. It's dangerous. It's dangerous, and I think people have,
So you're going to end
abused it.
up
I don't know.
with something there where it's going to be left to the individual
I think
to
it has to be.
somehow.
You can't infantilize people.
No.
You can. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess there are groups that do. Like, I mean,
Right.
some of the Hasidic groups, people are
Right.
the Rebbe treats you. You're a child, right?
Right.
And I'm telling you what to do and what to wear and so on. But if you're not buying into that type of society, and I think most of us don't, we feel that as a responsible adult, I can make these decisions. And the problem is that it's regularly happens that people make the wrong decisions.
Right. But maybe we have to think about mistakes a little bit differently too, that there are mistakes and there are mistakes. And learning how to be independently sort of navigating your life, there are going to be mistakes along the way. There are mistakes and then there are mistakes. Knowing the difference between catastrophic mistakes and the mistakes of just learning the ropes of leading an autonomous life, they might need to be thought of differently a little bit.
I mean, does the Torah trust us?
Yeah.
Right. I think so. I think it does. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
we are right. We don't have a surveillance. We don't not
Right.
obligation to have a surveillance system. I mean,
Right.
there are certain places where we would have, the on Chol Moed, laws of Chol Moed, the intermediate days of the festivals, which is
Yeah.
lots of fun. People are relaxed and chilled. So the
Right.
Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, says that the Beis Din should have officers who make sure that the intermingling of men and women in the parks and by the riverbanks doesn't get out of hand. Type of interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. There are
Yeah.
certain
So
desires which we have to be very very careful about. We have
yeah.
laws of yichud, not to be alone.
Yeah.
People who are not married to each other, and
Right.
many of those safeguards.
Yeah.
Safeguards with alcohol and is I think also
Yeah.
legitimate.
Yeah.
But again, it's up to the individual, I think.
So one of my experiences, I don't know if it's everybody else's experience, is that getting buzzed from alcohol does not add depth to spiritual experiences. It does not, if let's say I'm halakhically permitted to daven, I'm just slightly buzzed or something, but I have noticed that my experience with alcohol is that it does not in any way enhance the davening or the performance of mitzvahs. So there might be some people who think that they're getting some kind of higher experience because they're feeling high to some degree, but I've noticed that it does not help my service of Hashem. Now, there are some people who are experimenting with ayahuasca and peyote and LSD in guided groups for the purpose of expanding their connection to Hashem.
How do they know it's not just being high? How do they know they're connected to Hashem? In the same way as when you have alcohol and you think, oh yeah, and it's high, or you listen to beautiful music, right? What? Why is that? What? How does that any different from alcohol? And why?
They
Just because it's
they
guided?
claim that there are, I mean, obviously these are not scientific explanations of the phenomena, but it's something to the effect that we inhibit ourselves, that we have a natural uh, affinity for connection with the divine, that it's built into us, that we and there's in
Agreed.
some deep place we know how to make this connection, and that we're just getting in the way of it. That much of our life, much of our struggle with connecting to Hashem is getting through our own layers, our own boundary, our own inhibitions. We're inhibiting it to some degree. And that if you take certain, uh, uh, in this case, ayahuasca or LSD or mushrooms, psilocybin or something, so they have demonstrated that they can like break down those inhibitions or relieve those inhibitions so that a person, even somebody not well practiced, could have a very intense and profound spiritual experience. This is what they maintain.
Yeah, okay, they're claiming it's spiritual. It's sort of
Right.
interesting. There are commentaries who point out, when the sons of Aaron went into the tabernacle, it says with foreign fire, Aish
Yeah.
Zara Shaloit Siv Hashem, that Hashem did not command. And
Yeah.
and it's unclear what their sin was. And
Right.
immediately after that incident in which they died,
Right.
we are told that a Kohen cannot go in
Drunk.
drunk. And some
Right.
commentaries make that connection.
They want to say that it's not just alcohol that they're talking about.
Or they felt that some foreign substance will remove their inhibitions, and their intention was to connect to God,
Right.
but the connection was via a substance, not by working on themselves in an appropriate fashion through the power of discipline and through the power of
Right.
prayer and so on and so forth. Right? It's a shortcut, and it was type of like defined as an Aish Zara, a foreign fire, like foreign worship. And I don't know if it's very difficult, if not impossible, to verify whether this is just being high or whether it's spiritual or whether this is the Aish Zara, the foreign fire. I don't
Right.
know.
I My feeling about it, and it's just my own feeling. I'm no expert on it, but my feeling is this was an experiment that was done in the 60s by in the United States by people like Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary and others, and Ken Kesey on the West Coast, where they thought LSD and psilocybin were going to free humanity, that 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 people would just be filled with love and a sense of interconnectedness and etc. And that this ingredient is all that's missing, between now and a kind of utopia. And they seriously pursued this for a couple of years, and they came to the conclusion that it takes you through a door and then you come right back outside the door, and then it takes you through a door and you come right back outside a door. You don't grow from it. You don't end up in this place.
Mm-hmm.
You can visit this place briefly, but and in most cases they gave it up. They went to try
Fascinating.
other spiritual pursuits, etc., in order to get there. There's all sorts of examples of this, like in the 60s, late 50s and 60s into the 70s. And it seems like been there, done that, like and also it can be, I don't, it's because you're talking about something that releases inhibitions. It just seems like it is so highly dangerous on top of all the other concerns, especially, who are the people leading these things? What is the
Who you're
safety?
with. Yeah,
What are the
absolutely.
safety of the participants down the road? What is the role of the people that are guiding it? And all this, and especially like if it's not going to, if it doesn't hold, in other words, if you have some kind of experience and you went through the door and now all you have is a distant memory of it and no idea how to get back there on your own. So, and they've shown that. They've just shown it to, it seems to me. They've shown it. It just seems like been there, done that. And the only reason that, again, somebody might want to blow the dust off it and bring it back, um, maybe there's certain people that need to be given hope and they need to see that there's something to hope for. Maybe there is some limited kind of use for it. There was a guy, his name was
Unclear if the
Novak.
door is a door into spirituality or
Right,
just a door into some neurochemical
right,
experience, which is
right,
just induced by the drug.
right,
And the person felt great,
right,
and because there was someone suggesting that it was God or this and that, they accept that.
right,
Who's to say?
right,
There's no
right,
way of verifying this, and it's not. Yeah, I think it's very, very dangerous. Aside from, let's leaving aside all the psychotic episodes and deep depression that sometimes people have, and suicidal
right,
thoughts, and so on,
right,
which can be effects of some of these
right,
substances, which makes it even more dangerous than just the lowering inhibition issue.
right. Now we're talking about what I would call the adventurous use of these. There is medicinal use. There are people,
I'm talking
they're
about medicinal.
using it for depression and other kinds of things where it may have really important medicinal role to play. But what we're talking about it as a kind of adventurous use where you're trying to travel like to some place that you couldn't naturally travel on your own. There's this guy, I think his name was Avram Novik. He for 2 years, this is going back about 20 years ago or 20 something years ago, we hosted Shabbatones. He had a camp that was run in the summer for kids who had, Jewish kids who had drug issues. And these kids would, I think, go to Switzerland. I think the Biala Rebbe was the kind of sponsor
Oh yes, I've
of
heard of
this
that.
of this, and they had a camp in Switzerland. So he would go to different cities. He came to Chicago on like these recruiting Shabbatones, and so we had them at our house, and they were ridiculous. I mean, these kids were like just drunk or stoned or like and it was like this gathering of people. It was quite an experience to be in, but he was very comfortable sort of managing and moving in and around what was going on, and he'd point to kids who look like they're ready for the step to move on and the kids that aren't, and he's trying to figure out how to recruit and get these kids to come to what he was doing. But one of the observations he made, because he himself had been like a deadhead, he had followed the Grateful Dead and did LSD, lots and lots of LSD, when he was young. And he said, but one of the distinctive features between his time and what you see with a lot of these kids is that when they were doing it, it was all about the adventure, like, seeking kind of these outer body experiences or, spiritual kind of experiences through LSD and psilocybin, etc. But he said the kids nowadays, he feels it's like almost all medicinal. They're almost everyone he deals with is trying to self-medicate to
It's
try to get rid of the pain.
tragic, yeah.
Right.
Look,
And
I think that I mean a couple of takeaways is that we have to be vigilant about ourselves and about others, and at the end of the day, it's discretionary in terms of alcohol, in terms of meat, food, and so on and so forth. But to keep in mind this, the overall, I think the overall idea of kadoshim, meaning that my life is dedicated to being a better human being, a better Jew, connection to God. There are legitimate recreational components to that. There are legitimate relaxation components, right? It's legitimate to enjoy the world. On the contrary, Hashem, we have a whole range of brachot, blessings to enjoy this world. Part of it, I think, is alcohol. I don't know, and here's I don't think, and I'm again agreeing with Rabbi Reese that opening up another Pandora's box where we have to have even more policing, more awareness, and so on and so forth. What really? Why? Right? What are we? And as you pointed out, well, I don't know if people are accomplishing anything in terms of spirituality. Certainly nothing
right,
lasting, and
right.
certainly
The fun component.
yeah,
It'll be part in that if it, the truth is that I um there was a product that my father had that and then I looked it up online that was these were marijuana infused edibles that were that you could actually buy online. I don't understand the law because how does it work? It goes through
no idea.
some kind of mail. I don't know how it goes because I know federal law is not it's not legal federally, but somehow it goes through the mail. And there was a particular Hecher on it. I looked up the Hecher and I sent a picture of the Hecher and the name of the person to the CRC, Chicago Rabbinical Council has this site where you can find out.
Yes.
And they sent back reliable. So it might be that the floodgate has already, in other words, it may be, this is sometimes the way it works with organic kind of societal
Pun
movement,
intended. Yeah.
right? But it may be that it's already out of the cat's already out of the box on these. And I've heard about people in New York and other places that have where they're comfortable getting what they believe are kosher edibles and stuff. And so as things move in that direction, it's going to be a kind of similar challenge, which is that it's going to be left to the individual to.
Yeah, but we should not dismiss that. We should not dismiss it. It is indeed a challenge, and even without any of those substances, our current situation is a challenge. Alcohol and so on. So, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have a solution for any of this, but
Also,
awareness.
when you add again, I don't know how to ultimately codify these kinds of things, but when you add new don'ts to your life, you have to weigh it really, really carefully because in many people's lives, there's already a lot of don'ts. And also our own sense of um, our self-esteem. If when we cross lines that we make, and those become new don'ts in our life, it could be about eating, dieting, or what's healthy food and what's not healthy food, etc. When you find yourself inevitably crossing these lines that you've created, each one of them you pay a penalty like for it because you start to believe that you're doing things that are wrong and that are bad. And not everybody's self-esteem can handle a lot of that. And there might be people who would be encouraged not to add to the list of don'ts without care
Mhm.
in your life. Because every if I add on top of the fact that I beside the fact, let's say I overate or I ate the wrong kinds of foods or I drank too much or whatever, if I start to add to it that Hashem doesn't want me to do it, to each one, there's a price we pay. If we can meticulously observe it, then we're better off. But if it's unrealistic that I'm going to hold to the thing and I'm adding to it that Hashem doesn't want me to do this, there's a cost. There's a psychological cost. I don't know if there's a rule book that would help us know exactly when it's smart to do it and when it's not smart to do it. That's part of learning how to manage our lives. But I would just, as long as we're talking about this, encourage people not to add too many extra don'ts without a lot of careful thought and counsel with people that are mentors and friends of theirs.
Agreed. Okay. We didn't come to any firm conclusions, but that's not our job. But we did discuss what we said we were going to discuss. And thank you all for watching, listening, downloading, uploading, whatever you do. And that's it for us. God willing,
Okay.
see you next time.
Okay. All right. Be well.